Welcome to BIA Kelsey Live. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and I'm joined as always by our chief analyst, Mike Boland in San Francisco. How are you doing today?
Hi, Mitch. I'm well.
Good. I'm glad San Francisco is starting to recover from the storms of the century.
Yeah, it's been
Is
nice.
everything dry?
It's been beautiful last few days.
Fantastic. So we'll be into the coldest winter that Mark Twain ever spent. That is summer in San Francisco soon. So you'll be all set.
Exactly.
So this week, as always, we're going to be talking about local media and marketing news, and we're going to start off with what looks like maybe the revival of the local investment marketplace, and that is that Yext, the longtime business intelligence source for small and medium-sized businesses, has filed for its IPO. IPO is aimed at raising $100 million on top of the $117 million that they've raised from venture capital to date. But this is a company that has continued to revise its market positioning. Started off very much as a service provider to the YP industry, but has become a source of definitive business intelligence data, particularly around location, the people who work at a company, the hours that it's open, all of the standard listing information, as the market has continued to evolve and YP has shrunk. So what Yext is going to market with is increasing revenue. They grew their revenue to $89.7 million last year, which was a 49.5% increase. However, their losses increased by 53.1%. So this is still a business with a lot of challenges. And when they look forward and describe their opportunity, they say it's a $10 billion business. But it's very important to understand that not in the context of IYP, but the general mobile development. And that's what I wanted to ask you about, Mike, is what's Yext's main path to profitability? Where do they need to be focused in order to make this IPO a success?
Yeah, so you're right. They've pivoted a number of times. They're on a very interesting path now. You mentioned SMBs. They've actually evolved to move more towards the kind of multinational, multi-location, but localized businesses and all the kind of listings optimization needs that go with that.
Right.
A couple things going on here, and I want to get to the question about kind of the product strategy. But first, just backing up, I think in a macro sense, this will be kind of very important to the local advertising and media sectors. The outcome of its IPO, its public market performance, all that, because I think that will really impact investor appetite and things like valuations and multiples for exits in the space. And it really could alter the risk profile for local media companies and startups, which has really suffered over the past several years.
Right.
There's a lot of investor unease because of a combination of the fragmented buyer, at least those players going after SMBs, also the high churn, which kills a fundamental and valuation metric, which is recurring revenue. So a few players in local, I think, have really counteracted that feeling, Yext being one of them. Others like Empire are doing it, where the company is positioned not as a local advertising play, but more of a SaaS-based tech product that helps marketers close the loop and be more effective at driving and tracking offline business. So
Right.
Yext is important because it did this by, and I think there's an important lesson here, going after multi-location national players as opposed to SMBs, or at least adapting to that, but also more of that SaaS delivery platform. They're not selling advertising. This is a marketing platform. I think that's a key distinction. It also helps that they have a solid team, culture, good investors, a charismatic leader who many compare to Mark Benioff, speaking of SaaS. I've known Howard for years, and I agree that he's a great leader and a great operator. But from a product perspective, back to your question, it's a question of if Yext can transform the channel and the local media bundle. And what I mean by that is right now, like several other tech vendors in local, it relies on channel partners to distribute products to advertisers. And of course, the classic model there is that it allows for more reach and scale, but also diminishes margins. So
Sure.
Yext more and more has been going direct, which is easier said than done, but it's a question of if listings management and optimization, its core business, is becoming important enough, or more accurately, becoming recognized and demanded enough by multi-location business to the point where it can position Yext as a platform and as kind of like the centerpiece or the anchor of the local marketing or advertising product bundle. And if it can do that, I think it's a key question, because it can then be the channel. Go ahead.
So that's important to the rest of the uses we're talking about. The IYP market's very tiny, but the mobile advertising market's going to grow from $12.8 billion this year to about $29.2 billion in 2020. That's where Yext has to become the default provider of listings information in order to make that $10 million or billion-dollar target a viable one.
Yeah. Well,
and how are they doing there?
Well, importantly also, those figures you just cited are ad spend, which is important because I think that's, it is a proxy for the size of the market they're going after. The market they're going after is actually a lot larger because it is the marketing services that's going after that ad spend. So it's actually larger. It's equivalent or greater than, or I guess analogous to something like SEO, where we don't include things like SEO in our ad spending figures. It's actually aside from that and therefore a larger market. So Yext is going after that kind of like advertising and marketing services, and then even bleeding into things like CRM, which is interesting. So I think that positions it more broadly to achieve that $10 billion mark that they set forward in their announcement that is essentially their addressable market. So I think that the way they do that is to utilize the cash position they now have and the potential to kind of become that more robust platform that I mentioned, to start to make a lot of acquisitions to kind of like build up that platform play that they can have a I think compelling enough and broadly applicable enough bundle to start to become that channel for multi-location businesses, the go-to channel, and anchored by their kind of core product, which is that listings and optimization management and optimization platform.
Gotcha.
But then
great. Okay, so I think that's a good place to move on to our next topic, which is the return of the drive-in. As new innovations. So tell us about what's going on with McDonald's, and then we'll get to Amazon.
Yeah, sure. So lot going on here. So first focusing on what they've announced, which essentially is it's a pilot program, a few locations in California that let consumers order ahead and pay using their mobile app. McDonald's already had an app that let you view menu items, but this brings transactional functionality. So not only that, but what they're going for is something that's a bit more sophisticated than some of the other popular order ahead apps like Starbucks and Taco Bell, in that it's working towards some of these operational logistical things that we'll get into. But first off, it utilizes GPS to essentially start your order at an optimal time based on your distance from the restaurant and your speed, and it's that whole kind of ETA equation, similar to when Uber knows when you're going to arrive at your destination. So, a couple things going on there. But what I want to tackle first is the kind of consumer adoption of mobile payments, because that's kind of a key part in all this. And I've been saying for years, and proven right for years, that mobile payments will continue to be stuck in this rut if the value proposition is simply to kind of tap a phone rather than swipe a credit card. And that relatively marginal difference really doesn't mean a lot to mainstream consumers, especially when the ask is for them to alter such an entrenched habit of how they pay for things. So to most people outside of the tech sector, which is most Americans, paying with cash or credit card isn't really broken, although ironically the chip and pin situation could change that, but that's a different story. But the main point is that it's going to take much more meaningful value to get most consumers to adopt mobile payments. And the most tangible value proposition devised so far that we've seen is this concept of order ahead, because it can actually save people time as opposed to going and standing in line and ordering, then waiting and them calling your number and that whole thing. So the poster child of this, of course, has been Starbucks, because it's very conducive to coffee and being a recurring order that you can save in the app, and something that's done daily, so that frequency lends itself to loyalty programs, and people are in a hurry in the morning, so that kind of time-saving proposition really resonates. 10% of Starbucks orders during peak hours are through that order ahead functionality.
Exactly.
But back to McDonald's. that Starbucks example has been kind of the tech forward and somewhat elite kind of demographic of Starbucks customers. I think the McDonald's order and pay rollout is important because it brings that order ahead, pay in the background, and just pick up quickly concept, which again is going to be the thing that I think finally gets mobile payments over that adoption hump. It brings all of that to a larger swath of the American consumer public, and it could really be the jolt that mobile payments needs to get over that adoption hump. Or it could totally fall flat, which I think will be also a valuable experiment, because then we'll learn that mobile payments aren't going to scale. And I think if this doesn't do it, I'm not sure what will.
Well, so you're right. They're going to do a lot in terms of optimizing their space. But the question is, are they optimizing their consumers' experience? And I would argue that until they flip the equation and say, we'll come to you, they haven't really made a major change in that customer engagement that says, you must come to us to get our stuff, whether it's fresh coffee or fresh burgers.
You're right that, what's the point in going to the restaurant if you're just going to just like pick it up quickly? Why not get it delivered? But yeah. I would answer that by saying, why do people go through drive-thrus? The same argument would go against drive-throughs. So I think this is tapping into the use case. But all we've had is drive-thrus. Right, but this is tapping into the use case that already existed, which is people going to the restaurant. For those in a hurry, those not wanting to wait in line, I think it just makes it faster. But I think that's all like the consumer angle, which is, of course, important. We can continue discussing that. But I think it's also interesting on the actual merchant side, in this case McDonald's, there's a lot of implications for what this does for the logistics of how they serve food and work towards better yield optimization and turning over
better inventory management,
customers per hour and all that. I think that, and also distributing the load from, the combination of drive-through, the kind of curbside scenario that you mentioned, and also people in the restaurant. I think the next step, this whole mobile payments thing and order ahead is just the first step. The next step is actually physically transforming perhaps the kitchen, perhaps the way that they're serving food to kind of achieve that yield optimization. And this gets to, back to Starbucks just as an example, because I think it's parallel here.
Sure.
One of the challenges they found in their order ahead situation, even though it's been tremendously successful overall, one of the kind of snags has been that they actually get too many orders sometimes that the physical bottlenecks of the physical store can't handle. And if you think about it in the kind of offline sense before the order ahead situation, that kind of naturally meters itself, because the physical line is something that will kind of govern the inflow of orders, right? Like that's how much they can handle at any given time. And the line is never going to go around the block because people won't get into that line because the line's too long. They'll go to another Starbucks or another option. But with this order ahead situation, all of that isn't transparent. So they could feasibly just get like way too many orders. And then that doesn't help anyone, because then there's like this hold up for all the people that are waiting there, the people coming. So what I think all that is going to, that challenge, is, again, this kind of concept of yield optimization and the logistics where, Starbucks could conceivably start to make these kind of satellite locations that are just kind of like quick delivery kiosks that handle all these mobile orders, where you just staff it with like one barista and maybe one expediter, and it really helps there just kind of like meeting all that demand, but in a way that doesn't ruin the in-store experience. And that gets back to your point about kind of delineating what's the customer experience of like the people that want to sit there in the nice leather chair and listen to the Starbucks soundtrack versus those that just want their coffee quick. If you kind of delineate those two, it's almost like, forming a fast lane for the people that want to go fast, and it optimizes everyone's situation, right?
Right, and well, the other thing I can see this facilitating is analysis of what is being purchased and the analysis of introducing new products which make more of the available kitchen and inventory space. And so I think this is a good time to bring in the other aspect of this story, which is Amazon. So Amazon has in Seattle, GeekWire first broke this story. They've been working on two different types of stores. One is the Amazon Go store, which is the walk-in and everything is tracked and you don't need to pay for anything, and you walk out with your grocery store. It's going to be a kind of a pop-up kind of place. It won't be particularly large. It'll have higher-end food, such as salads and meats and the like, so that you can buy that kind of stuff on the way home. But it'll also have a mix of other kinds of impulse purchases from Amazon, certainly, so that you might even see a book you like and pick that up as well. So there's an interesting experiment with how much they can bring to bear on that small space using logistics. And then the other one is Amazon Fresh, which is actually a service that's been in operation for about 5 years. Amazon Fresh is a delivery service, but they are defaulting back to come pick it up. So these new stores are called Amazon Fresh to Go. Now, in that case, it's exactly the same kind of it looks like a 1950s drive-in. You drive into a slot. There's a message board there that says, welcome. We recognize you from your phone, and your order will be out in 1 minute, 2 minutes, or maybe we need to make a change, or would you like to add something? Which is also the upsell is always going to be critical to their best margins. So the Amazon move also takes the notion of delivery and backs it a little away to come see us. And I still think that's a gap that consumers are going to have a difficult time getting over, because you're both trusting that the virtual cart is going to be picked well. You know, you're going to get good fresh vegetables. You're going to get no bruises on your apples, no bruises on your bananas and things like that. That's where a lot of these judgments are going to happen initially. But then the convenience is simply that you don't spend as much time in the store. But if you've had to go and populate your virtual order, your shopping cart beforehand, that still took time too. So I'm not sure that they're going to achieve the level of convenience that people would like. I'm sure it'll be a great novelty when it first opens, but it'll be very interesting to see whether or not it sustains itself. Now, given that in relation to the McDonald's orders, where do you see mobile payments going, or where do you think they need to go in terms of new functionality for both of these kinds of tests to yield real results?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, I mentioned that mobile payments is going to need that like tangible thing for people to adopt it. And I mentioned that order ahead and saving time was one use case. Another one you just mentioned that reminds me is I forget the names of them, but the one that is the retail thing where you're going out picking your own stuff and it's automatically tallying.
Amazon Go.
Amazon Go, thank you. And it's automatically tallying in the background on your phone. I think that's the type of thing that can really get people on board mobile payments, because in that case, you're avoiding a checkout aisle. And it just all is paid for. That's what I refer to as in-aisle payments. That's another area that I think is going to eventually be adapted by like the Targets and Walmarts of the world. It's just put stuff in your cart and then it's going to be paid for in the background. Now, I think that all of the different varying use cases you described, you're right. I think there are some drawbacks to things like having someone else pick out your produce. I think that this is all experimental, and they're going to really discover through analyzing the heck out of this what types of products are conducive to, demand for people that want to pick things up on the way home, or they want to get things delivered. I think there's going to be a large variance there, and I think they're experimenting. But I think that the important part is that there are a number of different use cases out there. Some people want to pick out their own produce. They want to do it on their way home from work. Others don't want to deal with it, and they want that kind of curbside kind of service. So I think that really it's feeling out where those demand levels lie. And I think that, I don't have the answer for, what the perfect product model is, because my proclivities of like not wanting to go into a store and talk to anyone might be different than someone else that is bored and retired, and the highlight of their day is picking out their bananas. So I think that it's, it's probably going to vary. I
go to Starbucks because it's where they know my name.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
And that kind of touch is going to be added to these technology-enabled experiences. So one of the things, it could be kind of cool to walk in and have the Go person who you never even interact with know your name.
Yeah.
But we don't know. I think you're dead on. It's the opportunity to experiment and learn, which these represent right now. So one last story for the week, and it relates to this whole notion of going places. Google has introduced location data in one ad format. So what does that involve, Mike, and how do you see this starting to be rolled out as a useful tool for marketers?
Yeah. So this is an evolution or an extension of extensions. That's kind of a mouthful. So extensions is essentially Google's ad feature, where mostly so far in search, there are these little kind of search widgets or I should say search ad widgets, where as an advertiser in your AdWords campaign, you can specify that you want some of these things as ad components that show up. So for example, a offline business that wants people to come into the store can activate their local extension for a mapping widget, and that becomes part of the ad unit. It makes the ad unit more I guess, actionable and things like that. And customers that
Right,
don't.
or it could be open or closed based on the business hours listed.
Yeah, it's all kinds of just additional
Right.
information. So, or for example, a call to action instead of a map or a navigation. If you don't have a physical store, but you take orders over the phone, you will deactivate your map extension and activate the call one. So it's just, there's a lot of options that just create calls to action within ad units. That's what extensions are. Now, what they've done in this most recent announcement is they've taken that from search ads to also the display ads throughout the Google Display Network. So now, display ads that show up when you might be looking at recipes for kind of local stores that sell that, but not just that's nothing new. I mean, that's just Google's kind of contextual targeting. But in addition to that, now those extension-based calls to action that let you, not only see like the where you can buy this, but actually the closest store. And this all happens algorithmically based on the data that Google has from Google My Business, from other places like things that are optimized by EX to have the correct location information. And this is perfect for multi-location businesses that want to direct someone wherever they happen to be to dynamically get the information for the closest store. And that kind of all that stuff that happens in the background of extensions will now show up in these display ads in these contextual relevant ways. Again, if you're looking at Pinterest or you're looking at kind of a recipe site, something that has, groceries closest by. And the interesting thing, tying it back to Yext, is for this to work effectively for advertisers, the originating data has to be correct. So all that multi-location data, the address, the opening hours, like you mentioned, or the wrong calls to action are going to show up in these ads.
Well, and so really what we're talking about is Yext provides the essential first step for SEO, which is making sure the name, address, and phone number, hours, and that kind of stuff is correct. Does Google's entry into this business threaten Yext, or does it amplify Yext's opportunity?
It amplifies it because the presence of these options compel more accurate and updated data, which in turn makes Yext, who stands one step prior in the value chain, more valuable.
Yeah. Well, hey, we're at the end of another week. This, of course, is BIA Kelsey Live, and BIA Kelsey, a local market and media research firm based in Chantilly, Virginia. We are going to have a conference in Dallas coming up in early April, Dallas Impact. I urge you to take a look at our site and sign up. Also, we'll be back next week, Mike and I, as well as a guest, we hope. Until next Thursday at 10 a.m. Pacific time, I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and he's Mike Boland. Thanks very much for listening.